Bruchim Habayim. Welcome everyone. We are continuing in our journey through Halachot Shabbat. We started the very important Siman Resh Nun Gimel, the halachot of cooking, keeping things on stovetop, on the oven, in the oven, and what things can be returned, what things cannot be returned, using crock pots, blechs, hot plates, urns, all of those items that on a daily basis on Shabbat we deal with in a Jewish kitchen is what is going to be included in this Siman. So we started the Shulchan Aruch, Seif Aleph, based on the Gemara, the Sugya in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Lamed Vav, and Shulchan Aruch mentioned that you can put a pot on top of your stovetop. Let's imagine, talking about our stovetops, the tanur that they had back in a day. If you have covered the coals, if you have coals and you have covered them, then you could do it. If it's not covered, then you can't. You can't put it from before unless it's either completely raw, the food, or it's completely cooked to the degree that the further cooking is bad for it. So, for instance, one of the items that is very relevant is water, right? Water is considered mistamek. Berura, the Biur Halacha over here says it. Yalkut Yosef says it. Same is brought in many of the poskim, that water, the more it stays on and boils, the worse it is, because the quality is not becoming better, but the quantity is being lost. Evaporates, and you lose the amount of water that you have. So therefore, is mistamek veralo. You don't want it to be hotter than it is. You don't want it to start, lessening and evaporating. So therefore, you're not going to stoke the coals, so to speak, to make it hotter than what it is. Hence, it will be technically mutar to have a kettle on the fire, or to have an urn from before Shabbat on. The urn is considered like a thing that's on from before Shabbat. You could put it, and there's no problem whatsoever with having that on from before Shabbat. Says the Mishna Berura, Liten aleha, it doesn't mean that you can put or you can't put the pot on top of the stovetop going into Shabbat, even if it is already there. If it does not fit the bill of the criteria that we just mentioned, then you have to take it off and cover the fire if you want to put it on from before Shabbat. So for instance, if you have a pot of rice or cholent that is half cooked, and now it's going to become fully cooked, and it's sitting already on the stovetop going into Shabbat, you can't keep it there on top of the stove. You have to take it off. And you have to meet the criteria by covering the fire. You put the blech, and then you put it on, then you're good to go. Same is with a crock pot. If you have cholent that is half cooked on Friday afternoon right before Shabbat, so then you would need a blech for that as well to complete the cooking. Otherwise, you would have to change that, and you would not be allowed to keep it on that way. Mibe audio means means putting it right before sundown, putting it right before sunset. That is what the prohibition is. The reason for it needing to be fully cooked is because when it's fully cooked and it's not getting any better, we're not concerned you're going to stoke the fire, tamper with the level of the heat, the level of the fire, which again for us would be hiring the flame, hiring the level of the heat, whether it's a dimmer switch, whether it is a regular stove, of a gas stove, electric stove, doesn't make a difference. any of those things, you could be tampering with the level of the heat, but when something is completely cooked and it doesn't get any better, then you're not concerned you're going to tamper with it, because why would you tamper with it? But if something is half cooked and your guests are coming tonight, especially if the guest is someone important, right? And then every guest is important, no? So you may get nervous and without realizing come to higher the level or stoke the fire or stir the pot. That's also a problem. If you have a half-cooked cholent, it's not fully cooked, and you stir the pot, that by itself is a isur d'oraita of bishul, because now you're taking things that were upper on the top of the food level, and now they're going on the bottom, which is the heat is more intense, and those items get cooked faster. So that's also an issue, right? Putting the lid back is an issue if it's not fully cooked. So therefore, we have all kinds of concerns if the food is not fully cooked, that further cook would be unhealthy for it. But if you have fully cooked, that further cooking is not good for it, then we're not concerned at all. You just leave it on open fire from before Shabbat going into Shabbat, and that would be fine. Says the Mishna Berura, Mistamek veralo means kol davar she'adam atzef ksheyavesh v'nitchavis. Anything that you don't want it to further cook is considered mistamek veralo. Either because it's food that's fully cooked and now it's becoming too well done and it's dry, and some meat, if you cook them too much, they'll dry up. And then it'll be hardened. It loses the geschmack, juiciness of it. It loses the taste. So that's why. Or, like we mentioned before, what he says in Biur Halacha over here, by water. Water, once it's boiled, you don't need it to be boiling more. Further boil is bad because you're losing water as it evaporates. And therefore, it's considered mistamek veralo. Okay. How about coffee, right? Coffee and tea is the same thing. If you brewed coffee or brewed tea, and now it stays on with the tea leaves in it or with the coffee itself, it stays on top of the stove or in the tanur, it becomes worse. It becomes bitter, it becomes too thick, and people don't like it. There's a whole chokhmah to brew coffee and brew tea, right? If you ask the Eastern countries, including the Persians and the Iraqis and the Syrians, how to make tea, it's a whole chokhmah. They put it on, and they stand by it, mamash, like mashgiach tamidi. And as soon as the water bubbles once, they take it off right away. They keep it outside for so many minutes, and then they sift the leaves out, because if you keep it there for too long, it'll mess up the quality. You don't want it to be bubbling and boiling for a long time. It ruins the quality. Same as with the coffee. Says Harav Shem Chadash, many Achronim write this. Beferush, therefore, tea and coffee are considered mistamek veralo as well. Fine, says the Mishna Berura. Ve'echen beyafelo, hayru sameach mize. Mistamek beyafelo means you're happy that it should further cook. Cholent, for instance. Cholent, he cooks, on Erev Shabbat, you could eat it. It's cooked. It's well, But then you wait until Shabbat morning. It's not even comparable. It's mistamek ve'afelo. It becomes so much better, the quality of cholent over the time, even though that last night already was cooked. So cholent is considered mistamek ve'afelo. So therefore, we have to go back to our example that we gave 5 minutes ago. Now, it's not just the cholent that is half cooked that you have to be concerned about. But even if the cholent is fully cooked, still is mistamek ve'afelo perhaps. And therefore, you have to bear in mind to have the required elements for it to be mutar, which again makes it so much more important to deal with the question of the crock pot that has been debated for decades of what exactly is the status of a crock pot, right? Which you're going to get to. Says, again, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he this was towards the end of his life. Crockpot is an American invention. More recent decades, it made it to Eretz Yisrael as well, and now it's almost as popular in Eretz Yisrael as it is here. But when it just made its way to Eretz Yisrael, it became very, very debatable. Rabbi Shlomo Auerbach was not well. It was towards the end of his life, and when they discussed this with him the first time, he said one thing. That later on, he retracted that psak, and for a while, this was considered like a very gray zone type of thing. You have the heating elements. Is it considered hatmana? It's not just shehiyah, it's also hatmana is an issue potentially with the crockpots. So that's something that we will B'ezrat Hashem discuss a little bit more at length as a thing of its own after we cover the basics of this siman. So it says the Mishna Berura, Oshai Achai. The second scenario is when everything is completely raw. 5 minutes before Shabbat, you put a fresh pot of anything, raw meat and raw beans and raw grains. So that, of course, you're not going to be hoping for it to be ready for tonight. You're already showing that you want this for tomorrow morning. So therefore, you're not concerned, you're not worried, you're not anxious to have this ready, because by tomorrow morning is going to be completely ready. And therefore, you're not going to be concerned that much about this, right? So that is the second element. Says the Mishna Berura, "V'davka b'asar chai." Not everything that's raw is considered good enough. You need something that is tough and it takes time to cook, like meat, right? Because real red meat takes time until it's actually cooked. So therefore you give up on it for the night seudah. You're already hoping for only the morning. But if you have some little vegetable or things that are kaleh bishu, like fish, things easily cook in 2 minutes or in 10 minutes or in half an hour, that's already lo mehani. That doesn't help, because you still could be hoping for tonight. The Shulchan Aruch says later on that not only if the whole pot is raw, but even if before Shabbat, 5 minutes before Shabbat, you drop a piece of raw thing inside. Says Mishna Berura, that also is talking about the meat, not that you're putting a piece of vegetable or carrots inside. It means you're putting meat that is not edible raw, and it's tough. It takes time to cook. That's the criteria. That's the criteria.
And that's okay?
Mm-hmm. Meaning if your pot is half cooked, the cholent is half cooked, right? And you dump a little piece of meat right before Shabbat inside, raw meat, then you're good to go. Because that now considered the whole pot is considered as equivalent, a tenth amount to being raw.
How much meat do you have to put in there to constitute the whole pot?
Any piece would be fine, right? It would be fine. Or kazait at least. It's like a larger piece, not like a tiny little thing. Then you can put it mamash right before shkia, and you will be good to go, right? Now, says the Shulchan Aruch, Hainu da'afidu hu chama tafshil nami mutar le'ashhot. Even if you are warming the food up, right? If it's not cooked at all, even if it has become warmed up, let's imagine you plug in a cholent pot, right? And everything is cold, right? All the beans and the grains and the meat and the water and the sauce. So it takes time, half an hour, until it just gets warmed up, becomes hot. But it's not cooked at all. So even if it's hot, but it's not yet solid, it's not cooked yet, of course it's considered completely raw still, right? We're not concerned that you're going to come to stoke it and tamper with the flame, because it's not cooked yet, and therefore you're not going to be so concerned to to stoke the fire. Why would you stoke the fire? Because lemaher hatafshil, you would be stoking it to, fire up the coals, and that would hasten the process of bishul. It says the Mishna Berura, she'otzi mimenu chutz lakira. So we mentioned that if you don't want it to be a problem, you have two options. You could either take all the coals out of the oven or cover them. Right? Nowadays we don't have coals necessarily, but you could cover them. You could cover the fire with a blech. Right? So then it would be mutar for putting the half-cooked food on top of the blech as well. That's one of the reasons that people always have blech on Shabbat, right? Because this way you have no question. There's so many questions that could be asked. For instance, even what we said, putting a raw food, right? Imagine, how long does it take on a regular stovetop to cook a raw food? 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours? So imagine in a winter day that Shabbat comes in at 4:30, right? So 4:30 you're putting this raw thing on the stovetop, right, without the blech, until 12 o'clock midnight, 11 o'clock at night that people are usually up, right? How many hours do you have? 7 hours? Until 10 o'clock that everyone is up still? 6 hours? So of course it's going to be ready for tonight. So this whole becomes a whole machloket between the achronim. Maybe nowadays that our thing has changed, maybe also we have to be more concerned about this, even for night, right? So that's one of the reasons it's always good to have a blech. You don't never want to put something on an open fire on Friday going into Shabbat. You always want to have a covered thing. Now, what becomes a big question is with hot plates. And we're going to start discussing this because Harab Ovadia, alav shalom, he felt the hot plates, they're no issue at all because people don't cook on hot plates. They are made for just warming up things. Therefore, you could plug a hot plate in and you could put things on it on Shabbat, take things off. You don't have to cover it. You don't have to have aluminum foil on, nothing. You just put on it. Others disagree. Many of the poskim in Eretz Yisrael, they feel that in Eretz Yisrael it has become something that people do. They cook for a Shabbat on hot plates. Hot plates, there are those companies who make hot plates that are much hotter than other companies. And we could actually cook on them. And people do cook on them, say many poskim. So even hot plates become a machloket. Do you have to cover your hot plate when you want to warm something up on it? Or can you just use the hot plate by itself? So Chabad says you could just put the hot plate and use it as it is, without any covers, without any restrictions. You could do shihya, you could do chazara, you could do everything, because it's not derech bishul. It's not the way people cook. Nobody's going to look at you putting a pot on top of a hot plate and say, oh gee, he's cooking on Shabbat. No one's going to think like that. Everyone's going to know you're warming up things, you're not cooking. And others disagree with that stance in halacha. And that's something that Be'ezrat Hashem will discuss in the days to come.